All right, welcome to AgIO version 5.6. I'll just run it here. Ooh, pretty graphics. It looks a lot like before. This is my setup. I have a basic house router and a field module, a relay module, machine module, whatever you want to call it, and a steer system. And that's all connected via UDP, and also have an IMU over on this side that is connected via serial. And then the computer over here is the GPS, and it's connected via UDP to the router as well. All right, the AgIO hasn't changed much. Just every one of these graphics is a button, so don't be afraid to touch kind of anything. See the blue button here is a little flyout where some information for, but UDP only, for switches and WAS and all that other stuff. And then here's an analysis of RTCM, like your RTK coming in, what all the different messages are, like 1004, 5, that sort of thing. But we'll take a look at that. You can turn on and off. If you're not using, say, the IMU and the machine module, you just turn them off if you just want to use just these two. So that's all pretty slick. So just like before, I'll just connect an IMU module. Of course, you still can't tell which is which, but that's the joys of serial. And you'll notice it's green. When the light's green, that means it's talking. Well, at least it's talking to AgIO, not necessarily AgIO to it. If we disconnect, you notice it turns red. So that means you got a communication problem. Then the COM5 goes out as well. If we reconnect, you have to go back and reconnect. And everything's happy again. You don't have to reload or change any INOs if you're just using serial, but you do have to upload new INOs if you're using UDP. And again, you do not have to load anything serial. So you can just use AgIO version 5.6 without doing any changes in the USB serial modules. Okay, let's talk about UDP, and I'm just going to do it very top level. What I want to do is a couple of videos on setting up UDP and what the heck is a subnet and a host name and all these other things, and why you use 255s and zeros, and just a bit on how, the internet protocol, how it talks back and forth, and some of the basics of binary and why MAC addresses have letters and numbers, and it's not super complicated, but if you don't know the basics of it, then it really is kind of complicated. But once it does work, it is really, really easy to hook up. But the trick is, of course, getting it to work. So let's start with UDP. And I'm starting with a network that doesn't work. So connected networks, this is 220, that is this computer. That's my desktop, laptop, and this is its name, and you can identify it. Now what we've made is this entire network is a .5 network. So 192.168.1 is my house router, so it's a .1 network. And then these last digits are anywhere from 1 to 254 can be hosts. So this is the network name, 192.168.1 is the network name. And then the last part is the host name. And again, you can have 253 different ones within this one particular network. Now, we must have a 192.168.5 network, but we don't. So that's the first thing we need to fix. Now, you can just see the edge of a USB to Ethernet module, and then this cable runs around to the auto steer. Now, if you're going to be using the new Teensy board, which has GPS and auto steer, this is all you really have to do. You don't need a switch. You don't need anything. So I'm going to connect. Oh, before I do that, you'll notice here I have no Ethernet module connected. Agribot, that's the router for the .5 network if I wanted to connect via Wi-Fi, which we can do later too. But unless you have the Ethernet adapter actually connected to an Ethernet, network, what the heck number is it? We don't know. It has to have a network in order to be identified. So let's plug it in. There, now he's plugged in. I'll refresh this. Oh, there it did on its own. No internet, obviously. Now if we click on this, and it comes up into Ethernet, right? You have an Ethernet slot here. And what does it say for our IP settings? It says automatic DHCP. Now, wouldn't that be wonderful? But we have a very basic network which doesn't have, DHCP is a way to create and keep track of all the host names on your particular network. But if we were connected to a router, it would provide us with a name and try to keep track of everything. But what we've done is made sure that everything that we connect on the UDP network has a predefined address. So what we want to do is edit, and we want to say manual and IP version 4. Now we put in our IP address. So 192.168.5.127 is the number that you can put in for your host. Remember, this is the host, and we're part of the network. Now our subnet prefix length is 24 bits. Now you probably noticed, or you probably remember, or have seen before, 255.255.255.0. Now this is what's called a subnet mask. Basically, if these are all ones and these are zeros, then if we mask these first three numbers, then that becomes our network address. This, again, is our host address. So that's where the 0 comes in. So this can be any number. We don't care what it is, but these ones, we only want these numbers. And the short form for writing that is 24. 24 bits. 3 bytes is 24 bits. So the easiest way to write that is just 24. And our gateway, for some reason it wants 1.1. And that's all you got to do. And you go save. There, see, now our address is 192.168.5.127. That's our host address, and this is our network address. I know I keep repeating it, but it's important to remember these things. Like, that's what the subnet mask does. It separates, like if we went 255.255.0.0, then this would be our network address, and we could have now two numbers, 255 twice, so we could have 65,535 computers on this particular network. But we won't run out at 255 of them. So we're good for that. All right, just exit this. Oh, look. Now this is pretty smart because it will look for and keep updating as you connect and disconnect things. So if we disconnect the network now, see, he's gone. And if we try to turn UDP on, the big red X says, I got Snow.5 network. So how do we do that? Well, let's plug it in. Assuming your steer module's on. There. Now we're good to go. And we just go, yes. And then AgIO will reset. There, now we have a steer module. But since we're only connected to the steer module, and this is our host, then that's all we're going to see, because we just have a wire going from just our USB Ethernet adapter to there. Now we want our relay module, and we want our GPS also on UDP. So we're going to have to connect the router to everything. And you can use a switch, which is down here, which isn't a router, but I'll show you the advantage of a router here in a sec. Again, setting up the switch is you just, instead of just plugging in one, you just plug them all into the switch. And let's do that. I'm going to disconnect everything and then plug it into the switch. Okay, so quick switch-a-baroo. Now I'm going to take this yellow wire, And I'll plug him into the hub. Now this is the green wire. This one was the one that went to the steer module. I'll plug him in. And then our relay, this red one, he's connected to the switch. And then our other computer is connected by this yellow one into the switch as well. Okay, and then we plug this guy in. And voila, everything turns green. It wasn't that hard. We didn't change anything. We didn't do anything. See, there's our 5127 network. And again, that's our Wi-Fi network on this laptop, which is connected to the home router. So if we do anything weird, like say we unplug the steer module, well, it turns red and says there's a problem. Now the other cool thing we did, plug him back in, should go green. It doesn't need to be communicating. It doesn't have to have OpenGPS on, none of that stuff. If we minimize this and unplug it, it'll pop up when it has an error and show you and say, big red flag here that there's something wrong with the steer module. You'll notice it probably because it stopped steering, but this is nice because it just pops up and shows you what the problem is. Again, this is data going out of the module. This side is data going into the module. RTK going into the antenna, RTK going, or GPS position coming out of the antenna. All right, let's plug them back in. No reconnection, no nothing. That makes it really, really simple. Okay, now when we use the flyout, everything's kind of active. If I turn the wheel angle sensor, like look right here, it says angle and counts. Counts is the value, the raw value coming right from the A to D converter. So you should go from 6800 to minus 6800, and same with the angle. And depending on what you have your counts per degree, that'll affect your angle. But it's just, you don't need AgIO, or sorry, OpenGPS running. You can do all that directly. As I close the work switch, it goes from true to false. And same with the steer switch. If I click on the relay test, relays come off and on. I don't know if you can see the lights very well, but let me turn it like this. It's an easy way just to test the relays. Make sure they all turn on and all turn off. And you can see that they're resting at 1. That means I have the inverted on. So it just shows you a lot more information. And this gets fed every second to, to update these values. And they're always there. Make them disappear, make them not. Again, starts counting down. So the menuing has changed a little bit. The menuing has stayed pretty much the same. GPS data and device manager. GPS data is the same thing as touching here. And device manager, well, you know what that is. This brings up OpenGPS. I would recommend running AgIO first. Now when you run OpenGPS, it doesn't run AgIO. So if you run this guy first, make sure everything's talking, and then run OpenGPS, then that's probably a better way to do it. Now NTRIP, it has changed a little bit. Here you have your different choices for, if you're using a wireless or Wi-Fi for your NTRIP in the cab, make sure you have your IP address for that. And if we just turn NTRIP on, of course it'll reset because it's a major change. Okay, NTRIP. If we, let's pick a better one here. Source control. Now you can sort on both distance away and mount point if you have trouble finding a name. Some of these names, some of these are getting pretty long. This Automato Robotics is a very verbose one, so we'll pick that. So yeah, I can choose one or the other now. Here you can send it to GPS via serial or via UDP. and advanced. Some of those settings that were here, to clean that up, hardly anybody uses these, are here. And then this is one of the other big changes with 5.6 is that instead of sending the whole big wad of data that comes in on a packet to the GPS antenna and flooding the buffer, is we've broken it up in chunks of 256 bytes so that serial ports can handle the data better. But other than that, this is all pretty much the same. You can see it's just a few seconds, it'll log on. So here, this number up on top here is the length of the packet that's coming in. So it's 1234 bytes per packet. This is a station ID if it finds it. Now this is not, it's not perfect, but we're getting there. It's really hard to know kind of how some of this stuff works and how the RTCM gets parsed. And it's kind of like CAN bus. They're a little shy to tell anyone how it works until you pay big dollars. So yeah, as you can see, it works pretty good. You know, it shows you the messages. But if you are really having troubles and you want to really find out, well, I should be getting, you know, this 1006, I should be getting it every time, and I'm not. Well, use a better, you know, a better tool for that, like RTKlib or that sort of thing. If you touch here on the box, it'll reset it. You know, if it finds too many weird ones or that sort of thing, you can reset it by touching the box. Remember, everything on here you can pretty much just touch. There, it's just making up the messages. Oh, there, and see, we ran out of time. If I click over here and make this active, then there's a 5-minute counter that starts counting down. Like if you clicked on AgIO OpenGPS and you maximized it, this guy in 5 minutes will minimize on its own and go down to the bottom. Here you have your latitude and longitude. Check your GPS data. Here's Panda coming in. And the values, it's not a real very good Panda because it doesn't fill in these, but it's close enough. The other options for NTRIP are radio. Now it says air NTRIP on, but you have to turn the other air trip, this guy, off before you can do that. Now it'll reset. NTRIP, this is the radio NTRIP. If you don't know what this is, then you probably haven't used it yet, and it probably doesn't matter. So people that do use it know how to use it, so I'm not going to go through it. The other option is serial NTRIP. This works good now, too. So I have this computer set up to Bluetooth as a COM port, COM4. And if I connect, whoops, I have to turn them on first. Remember, anytime you do a major change, AgIO will reset. Maybe a pain in the neck, but it's the only bestest way to make sure that it works every time. So, okay, where's the camera? So that guy's spitting out. That's my NTRIP source now. And I go, okay. And then wait there, now the data is coming in via Bluetooth to this laptop, to this host, and then serial, and then off to the steer module or the GPS module, whichever you're using or you want to use. So that all works pretty slick. So you can kind of do anything you want now. You either do it via air, you can do it via radio, which is also air, or straight serial. If you want to connect your cell phone and you have an NTRIP on your cell phone that has direct serial output, then you can connect it to the computer and charge your phone and use the serial connection at the same time. So that's kind of slick too. Okay, I disconnected the GPS. I'm going to run AgIO OpenGPS. There's not a lot of changes in AgIO OpenGPS. Oh yeah, turn the simulator on. I disconnected the sim. Okay, we'll start a field. New button is, you're driving along and you stop, and if you want to back up and that thing's in the wrong place, hit this button and that straightens out the tool. Big whoopee, but yeah, if you're backing up or if the tool's wrong, that sort of thing, then that's a really handy button. And I think about the only other thing that's changed is this panic stop speed. It's not, if you change more than say 4 kilometers an hour per second, then if we speed up and then slow down, then it'll turn off auto steer. So just kind of a safety thing. And beyond that, OpenGPS hasn't changed much. It's been super stable, so why break it? AgIO needed breaking, and it does a whole lot more with a lot slicker things. Okay, let's talk about something that seems to be really painful out there, and that's the firewall. Now, I have a secondary Komodo firewall on this, so it does make it a little complicated to show exactly what happens. But now the first time you run AgIO and it wants to use the network, the firewall, what it tries to do is prevent any application from talking to the World Wide Web and all the hackers out there if you don't want them to. Now, the important thing to remember is when this thing comes up, it says Windows Security Alert. Windows Defender Firewall has blocked some features of AgIO on all public and private networks. Now, if you just ignore this, well, yeah, you're going to have trouble with your firewall. And when someone says turn off your firewall, don't. Like, you want to leave your firewall on all the time. The problem is not the firewall. The problem is the guy controlling the firewall. So when it says AgIO, we want private networks and public networks. When you use Ethernet in a hardwired USB adapter, it is a public network. So be sure and check public network as well as private network. And then we go allow access. And everything will work just fine. Now, if you have it and you've been turning off your firewall in order to get OpenGPS to work, well, what we want to do is allow an application through the firewall. So all you do is you bring up the start menu and you just type allow, oh, look at, there it is, allow an app through Windows Firewall. And here it is. And then we look for AgIO. Now, it's the one below this. You can't see the tick marks, but we can see it's checked for private and public, and AgIO is an allowed application. If we disconnect this, we can't change anything unless you click on the change settings. If you say don't allow this app, then you will have firewall problems and someone will tell you to turn off the firewall. Rather than doing that, allow the app through if you want it through, and make sure that the private and public networks are allowed. You can also add an application by clicking on allow another application. Browse for the application. So it's all really, really simple to use. Just make sure and don't ignore. Let's do that. Don't ignore that. Let's delete this. Remove it. It says, if you remove AgIO from the exceptions list, it might stop working properly. To disable it temporarily, clear its checkbox. So you can enable and disable just by using the checkbox, but we want to remove it completely. And now we get rid of this, and we get rid of this, and we run AgIO again. Oh, there it says, has blocked some of the features. And we go, oh, what's this stupid window for? Get out of here. And then just do that, and then we wonder why. Again, I have a secondary that controls AgIO, so it's going to work anyway. But if you didn't have a secondary firewall, it will not let the anything through that firewall. So we go allow, and let's see what it did. Allow an app. And you can see there it is, and it's not checked. So it's not allowing that app to connect and communicate through the network. Again, check it. See, it's public and private. Click OK, and then gone. And now everything's happy. If we run it again, no problem. So that's Windows Firewall. I thought I'd add that on.